Good evening, my dear. I am Count Dracula, and tonight you will fall asleep with me as I gently guide you toward rest. Do not be alarmed. I know my reputation precedes me. Centuries of stories, of warnings, of shadows cast longer than the truth that created them. But I want you to set aside, for this evening, everything you think you know about me. Because the creature who comes to you tonight is not the monster of the stories. I am something far more interesting than a monster, and far more useful to you in this particular moment than any monster could ever be. I am a being who has spent centuries observing the night, not fearing it, not enduring it, not waiting impatiently for the morning, but genuinely inhabiting it, exploring its qualities, understanding its rhythms, learning everything that the night has to teach to the one who is willing to pay attention. And the night has a great deal to teach, far more than the daylight world is willing to acknowledge. I have watched humans struggle with the night for as long as I can remember, which is a very long time indeed. I have watched them resist it, fear it, fight it, fill it with artificial light and artificial noise to avoid the particular quality of attention that the night demands. And I have found this not frightening, but genuinely sad, because they are fighting something that is trying to help them, something that, properly received, offers more than the daylight ever can. Tonight, I am going to share with you what I have learned across my long acquaintance with the night, about sleep, about rest, about the particular intelligence that emerges in a person who has genuinely made peace with the hours of quiet. I am going to speak to you with the unhurried patience of someone who has all the time in the world, because I do. And by the time I am finished, I believe you will find that the night is not something to be endured. It is something to be entered with the same deliberate, appreciative attention that I have brought to it for longer than you can quite imagine. Let me begin by telling you something about the nature of my existence that most people do not consider. Something that changes entirely the way you might think about the night and what it is for. I am a creature of the night, not because daylight is my enemy, though the stories make much of this, but because the night is my natural element. The way a fish is a creature of water, not because air is hostile, but because water is where it is fully itself, fully capable, fully expressed. And what I have discovered in centuries of living this way is that the night has a quality of reality that the day cannot match. Not because darkness is more truthful. I am not making a Gothic claim about the superiority of gloom, but because the night strips away what the day allows you to hide behind. The activity, the noise, the performance of productivity and competence that daylight culture requires of you from the moment you open your eyes until the moment you close them. At night, particularly at the deep, quiet hours when the world has finally stopped performing, What remains is what is actually true. The thoughts you have not had time to think during the day rise to the surface. The feelings you have been too busy to feel make themselves known. The questions you have been avoiding stand quietly in the center of your attention and wait. Most people experience this as distressing. They experience the night's honesty as a problem, something to be solved or escaped or medicated away. I experience it as one of the night's great gifts. Because the thoughts that rise in the night, the feelings, the questions, the things that have been waiting, are not your enemies. They are the most important things in your life asking for a moment of genuine attention. And the person who can receive them, who can sit with the night's honesty without immediately trying to escape it, develops a quality of self-knowledge that the person who is always busy and always distracted never quite achieves. Tonight, I am going to help you receive what the night is offering, not by analyzing it or solving it, but by learning to be with it in the way that I have been with the night for longer than you have been alive. I want to tell you something about time, about my particular relationship to time, because it contains what I consider the most immediately useful teaching I can offer to someone who is lying awake at night when they would rather be asleep. I have lived for centuries. The exact number varies depending on which account you consult, and I have read most of them. With the particular mixture of irritation and amusement that comes from recognizing yourself in a portrait painted by someone who never met you. But whatever the precise number, the effect of this longevity on my experience of time is significant and worth sharing. I do not experience urgency the way you do. Not because nothing matters to me. Many things matter to me deeply, and the centuries have not made me indifferent. But because I have lived long enough to know that the urgency most humans attach to most things is almost entirely manufactured. The thing that feels desperately urgent at midnight almost never deserves the energy you are giving it. I have watched the urgent things of 100 generations become the forgotten things of the next generation. I have watched crises resolve, catastrophes pass, impossible situations find their way to resolution through the patient passage of time, rather than through any amount of nocturnal anxiety. And I have observed something even more striking. The people who resolved their crises most effectively were almost never the people who stayed awake worrying about them. They were the people who rested, who gave their minds the genuine restoration of sleep and woke in the morning with clarity, with access to their full capabilities, with the ability to see what the exhausted midnight mind could never have seen. This is the time perspective I want to offer you tonight. not my centuries. I am not asking you to become indifferent or detached, but the simple, practical recognition that the urgency you feel about the thing you are thinking about right now is almost certainly not proportionate to the thing's actual importance. In 5 years, even in 5 weeks, the specific texture of tonight's worry will be unrecognizable. The problem may still exist, but this particular midnight quality of it, this exact shade of impossible, will have changed completely. Because that is what time does. I know this better than almost anyone. Let me tell you something about the castle, my castle in the Carpathian Mountains, that most visitors noticed only as a place of dread, but that I have always experienced as something quite different. The castle is old, older than me in its foundations, built by people whose names are now unknown, for purposes that have long since dissolved into history. Its stones have absorbed centuries of weather, rain and snow, and the particular cold of mountain winters that begin in October and do not release their grip until April. And within these old walls, there is a quality of stillness that I have found nowhere else in the world. Not emptiness. The castle is full of things, of accumulated history, of objects that carry stories, but a genuine stillness, a settled quality that comes from age, from having stood through so much that movement and noise and urgency have simply lost their power to disturb it. The stones of the castle have outlasted every drama that was ever played out within them. Every argument, every crisis, every moment of despair that seemed at the time like something that could not be survived. All of these the castle witnessed and outlasted, and continues to stand, indifferent to them, in the way that only great age can be indifferent. I want to invite you to borrow this quality for tonight. Not to become indifferent to your life, but to locate within yourself something that has the stillness of old stone. Because it is there. Every human being has something in them that is older and quieter than the thoughts currently creating noise. Something that has outlasted every previous crisis, that has been present through everything difficult that has ever happened to you, and has continued to be here, consistent, unbroken, available. The thoughts circling at midnight are not that thing. The worry is not that thing. The urgency is not that thing. But underneath the thoughts, beneath the urgency, there is something quieter, something that has the quality of old stone, that has been here longer than this particular trouble, that will be here after this particular trouble has passed. Rest in that tonight. not in the thoughts, not in the urgency, in the older, quieter thing beneath them, the thing that has always been here and that the night, properly received, can help you remember. I want to tell you now about something that I find genuinely fascinating about the biology of the creatures I have observed, including my own biology, such as it is, and that speaks directly to what your body is asking for tonight. Bats, those creatures most associated with my legend, and with whom I have a complicated relationship that is more metaphorical than literal. Bats have one of the most remarkable sleep behaviors in the animal kingdom. They sleep upside down, hanging from their feet, completely inverted, in a posture that would be impossible for most creatures and that requires for them no effort at all, because their feet lock in position when they relax, meaning that sleep literally requires less energy than waking. They sleep between 16 and 20 hours per day, in some species more. And this extraordinary investment in sleep, this commitment to rest that exceeds the time given to any other activity, is not laziness. It is intelligence. The bat's echolocation, the extraordinary biological sonar that allows it to navigate and hunt in complete darkness, that can detect an object as thin as a human hair at distances of meters. This requires a brain of remarkable sophistication and sensitivity. And that brain maintains its extraordinary precision precisely because it rests so much. The most sophisticated biological instruments require the most extensive maintenance. The most sensitive systems need the most recovery time. The most complex and capable minds, including yours, need more rest, not less, to perform at the level they are capable of. Your culture has gotten this entirely backwards. It treats the need for sleep as a weakness, as a limitation to be overcome, a biological inconvenience to be minimized. But nature, which has been running this experiment for hundreds of millions of years and knows considerably more about it than your culture does, nature allocates more sleep to the more sophisticated systems. The bat sleeps 20 hours so that it can navigate in perfect darkness for 4. What might you be capable of if you gave your extraordinary brain the rest it is actually asking for, rather than the minimum you can get away with? I want to speak to you now about something that I have thought about across the long centuries. Something about the nature of transformation, which I understand rather intimately. My legend is built on transformation. The transformation between human and other forms. The transformation of night into personal kingdom. The transformation of vulnerability, of sleep, which is when humans are most undefended, into something that I approach with a reverence that the stories never quite capture. Because sleep, genuine, deep, complete sleep, is itself a profound transformation. Not a dramatic one, not one that is visible to any observer, but real and significant in ways that science is only beginning to fully document. During sleep, the person who lies down is genuinely different at the cellular level from the person who wakes up. Not metaphorically different, chemically, hormonally, neurologically different. damaged proteins have been cleared from the brain. Neural connections that were weakened through the day have been strengthened or reorganized. Hormones that govern mood, appetite, and stress response have been rebalanced. The immune system has done work that it cannot do while you are active. The person who wakes in the morning is not the same person who lay down at night. They are a rebuilt version, repaired, restored, reorganized by processes of extraordinary sophistication that operate entirely without your conscious awareness, and that require only one thing from you: your willingness to be still long enough for the transformation to complete. I find this beautiful. The nightly transformation of the human person, quiet, invisible, profound, is one of the things I have watched across centuries and never ceased to find remarkable. And my advice to you, from the perspective of someone who has observed this transformation more times than any human could count, is to honor it. Not to resist it, not to delay it unnecessarily, not to treat it as an interruption of your real life, but to recognize it as one of your life's most essential processes. The transformation that happens while you sleep is not separate from the life you are trying to live. It is what makes that life possible. Let me tell you something about solitude, about the particular quality of being alone that the night makes available, because I believe it is one of the most undervalued and most necessary experiences in a human life. I have spent a great deal of time alone, more than any human, by virtue of the particular nature of my existence, by virtue of the centuries that have moved past while I have remained, by virtue of the specific texture of my solitude, which is different from the solitude most people experience. And what I have learned from this solitude, what I want to offer you as practical wisdom, is that there is a quality of attention available in solitude that is simply not available in company. Not because company is inferior, I am not arguing for isolation, but because there is a particular clarity that only arises when the social performance has stopped, when there is no one to be anything for, when the attention can turn fully inward without guilt or apology. This is the attention of the night. This is what becomes available when the day's company and the day's performance have finally released their hold. And most people, when they finally have access to this attention, when the noise is gone and the performance has stopped, immediately fill the space with more noise, with screens, with podcasts, with the scrolling that simulates the social engagement they are technically free from. Because genuine solitude, the kind that allows genuine self-knowledge, requires a tolerance for quiet that contemporary life does not develop. And the discomfort of genuine quiet often feels to people who are not used to it like something that must be escaped. My advice is this: learn to be with the quiet, not as a spiritual practice, not as a form of discipline, but simply as the recognition that the quiet of the night is not empty. It is full of the things that do not have space to be heard during the day, full of your actual thoughts, your actual feelings, the actual texture of your inner life that the busyness keeps at a manageable distance. These things are not enemies. they are the content of your life, and making peace with them, allowing them to be present without immediately silencing them, is one of the most important things you can do for the quality of your inner experience. And incidentally, one of the most reliable paths toward genuine sleep, because the mind that is at peace with its own contents does not need to fight them into submission before rest is permitted. Here is something I want to share with you about the relationship between patience and power, because I think it is one of the most misunderstood aspects of what genuine strength actually looks like. I am often depicted in the stories as powerful, and in the story's terms, in terms of physical capability and the ability to inspire fear, this is not inaccurate. But the power that I actually value, the power that I would recommend to you as worth cultivating, has nothing to do with physical strength or the ability to frighten. It is the power of patience, the power of being able to wait genuinely, comfortably, without agitation, for the right moment, the right conditions, the right approach. Patience is profoundly underrated in your culture. The culture prizes urgency, speed, immediacy. The person who acts quickly, who moves fast, who does not wait. And there is a time for this, certainly. But the capacity for genuine patience, for the ability to hold a course steadily across time, without the constant need for visible progress, without the anxiety of the person who cannot bear not to be moving, this is rarer and more valuable than the culture acknowledges. And here is what I know about patience from the particular vantage point of centuries. The patient approach almost always produces better outcomes than the urgent one. Not always more quickly, but more surely, more sustainably, with less collateral damage along the way. The patient person does not make decisions from fear. They make decisions from clarity, from the understanding that comes when you have waited long enough for the initial emotional charge of a situation to settle into something you can actually see. And sleep is the most fundamental practice of patience. Every night, you are asked to wait, to stop, to be still, to trust that the morning will come and that the morning will bring what the night could not provide. The patient person makes this waiting easy. The impatient person, the one who cannot bear to not be doing, who cannot tolerate the quiet, who experiences the night as an obstacle rather than an ally. This person fights sleep, and in fighting it, delays it. Practice patience tonight. Not as a passive surrender. Patience is never passive. It is the active choice to remain steady, to trust the process, to allow things to unfold in their own time, rather than demanding that they unfold in yours. Practice this patience with sleep and watch what it produces. I want to tell you now about something that I have noticed across centuries of watching humans navigate the experience of being alive. Something about the relationship between control and suffering that I consider one of the most important things I can share. Human suffering, in my observation across centuries of watching it, is not primarily caused by difficult circumstances. Difficult circumstances are uncomfortable. They require adaptation and resilience. But the deepest suffering, the suffering that persists long after the circumstances have changed, the suffering that is unrelated to the actual difficulty of the moment, this suffering almost always traces back to the same source: the attempt to control what cannot be controlled. I have watched empires try to control the future and be undone by the things they did not see coming. I have watched individuals try to control the people they loved, out of genuine love often, but still, and watched the relationships wither under the pressure. I have watched people try to control their own minds, to force certainty where uncertainty is the truth, to maintain the performance of stability while the inner life insisted on its own different reality. And the suffering, in every case, was not the thing that could not be controlled. It was the attempt to control it. The energy poured into the impossible project of managing what is inherently unmanageable. Sleep is the domain where this is most clear and most directly felt. Sleep cannot be controlled. It can be invited. It can be created conditions for. It can be made more or less likely to arrive, but it cannot be commanded. And the person who tries to command it, who lies down with a grim determination to fall asleep, who monitors each minute that passes without sleep arriving, who treats sleep as a task to be completed by force of will. This person produces exactly the wakefulness they are trying to escape. The release of control, the genuine, willing, non-anxious release of the outcome, is the condition that allows sleep to arrive. Not the performance of relaxation, not the technique of controlled breathing done with white-knuckle determination, but the actual, genuine recognition that some things are not yours to control, and that this is not a problem. Tonight, release the control over sleep. Not because you have given up on sleeping, but because you understand that sleep arrives when it is allowed, not when it is forced. Create the conditions, settle the body, quiet the mind, and then release the outcome. Trust the process. Allow what is already underway to continue without your management. Let me offer you something now about the experience of being misunderstood, because I am perhaps one of history's most misunderstood figures, and I have had a great deal of time to develop a perspective on what misunderstanding is and what to do with it. The stories about me are not accurate. They are not even trying to be accurate. They are trying to serve a different purpose, to give human fear a face, to externalize the terror of mortality and the night into a figure that can be encountered and escaped. I understand this. I do not resent it precisely, but I have had to develop a particular relationship to the gap between who I actually am and who the stories say I am. And this relationship contains something that I think is useful for anyone who has ever been significantly misunderstood. The first thing I learned is that the story someone else tells about you reveals more about them than about you. My legend is built on human fear of the night, of death, of the loss of control. These fears are understandable. They are genuine, but they are not my biography. The person who misunderstands you, who has reduced you to a role in their own story, who sees in you only what serves their narrative, is telling you something about their own inner landscape, about their fears, their assumptions, their unexamined beliefs. They are not giving you an accurate account of who you are. And the response to misunderstanding that I have found most effective after centuries of practice is not to fight it, not to spend enormous energy trying to correct every misperception, not to make the story someone else tells about you the central preoccupation of your inner life, but to know clearly, quietly, without defensiveness, who you actually are. To have such a settled relationship with your own reality that the stories others tell simply do not have the power to destabilize it. This is the work of the night, in a sense. The night strips away the audience, the people whose perception of you spend the day managing and performing for. And in their absence, there is an opportunity to encounter yourself directly. Not the version you present to the world, but the actual person living in this body with these thoughts, these feelings, these genuine concerns. This encounter is valuable, even when it is uncomfortable, even when the person you find in the quiet of the night is different from the person you are publicly. Especially then, because the person in the quiet is the real one, and the real one is worth knowing. I want to share with you now something about my relationship with mortality, with the fact of death, that I think you may find unexpectedly useful in the context of sleep. My legend places me in a complicated relationship with death. I have been described as something that evades death, that transcends it, that exists in a space between living and dying. And while I will not confirm or deny the specifics, some things are better left mysterious. I will tell you this. I have thought about death more than almost any other subject. Not with fear, not with longing, but with the genuine curiosity of someone who has watched many, many human lives complete themselves, and who has noticed certain things about how people live when they are genuinely aware of mortality. People who have genuinely reckoned with the fact that they will die. Not the vague intellectual acknowledgement that everyone carries, but the genuine, felt, visceral recognition. These people tend to live differently. They tend to be clearer about what matters, less willing to spend their finite time on things that do not, more present in the moments that are actually happening, rather than perpetually managing towards some future state. And here is the specific thing I want to say about sleep. The person who genuinely understands their mortality does not struggle with sleep in the way that the person who is avoiding this understanding struggles. Because sleep, genuine, surrendered sleep, requires the same quality of release that death will eventually require. The release of control, the letting go of the day, the trust that the self continues to exist even when consciousness is not actively maintaining it. This is not a frightening parallel. It is an ennobling one. Every night, you practice the art of letting go. Every night, you demonstrate to yourself and to the universe that you are capable of releasing what you cannot hold, that you can trust what you cannot see, that the continuity of your existence does not depend on your constant conscious supervision of it. This is good practice, important practice, the kind of practice that makes a life richer, not by making it longer, but by making it less contracted around fear. And the person who has genuinely learned to sleep, to truly let go into the night, has learned something about living that cannot be learned any other way. Let me tell you now about something that I have observed about relationships, about the people who have moved through the centuries alongside me, and the ones who have moved through without me, because it contains something I believe is important. The most enduring relationships I have observed, the ones that lasted not just years but decades, that deepened rather than diminished with time. These were not the ones built on excitement or intensity. They were the ones built on a quality I would describe as steadiness. Steadiness is not glamorous. It does not make for compelling stories, but it is what makes a life with another person genuinely livable over time. The steady person shows up, not dramatically, not with grand gestures, but reliably, consistently, with the quality of presence that the other person can count on. And steadiness is built on rest. The person who is chronically exhausted cannot be steady. They can be many things: driven, impressive, capable of extraordinary bursts of effort. But the quiet, reliable, genuinely available steadiness that close relationships require over time, this requires the restored self that genuine sleep produces. The rested person brings their actual self to the relationship, not the performance, not the managed version. The actual person, with their actual patience, their actual curiosity, their actual capacity for genuine attention. and genuine attention, the experience of being truly seen by another person, is what people most hunger for in their relationships. Not the grand gesture, not the impressive achievement, but the simple, profound, completely ordinary experience of being actually noticed by someone who actually cares. You cannot give that when you are depleted. You can only give it from fullness, from the fullness that rest provides, that sleep restores, that the nightly renewal of genuine recovery makes possible. Sleep well tonight, so that tomorrow you can give what people actually need rather than what exhaustion allows. I want to tell you something now about the particular quality of the very late night, the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, that I find most interesting and most worth understanding. These are the hours that humans most often describe as the most difficult. The hours when the mind is most prone to the particular darkness of uncontrolled thought, to the amplification of anxiety, to the catastrophizing that turns manageable concerns into impossible ones. And I want to offer you an explanation for this that I think is more useful than the usual ones. Because understanding why something happens often dissolves the power it has over you. The biological reality of these hours is that the human body's cortisol, the hormone of alertness and stress response, is at its lowest point. The serotonin systems that support mood and perspective are less active. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational judgment, for putting things in proportion, for the voice that says, actually, this is manageable, is operating with reduced capacity. In other words, the thoughts that feel so large at 3 in the morning are not more accurate than your daytime thoughts. They are less accurate. They are the products of a brain operating under the specific conditions of this particular hour. Conditions that systematically favor catastrophizing over perspective, fear over calm, the worst possible interpretation of any situation over the range of interpretations that are actually available. The 3 in the morning version of your life is not your life. It is your life as filtered through the most distorting lens available to your biology. And the most direct response to this filter, the most intelligent, most effective response, is not to engage with what it produces, not to argue with the 3 in the morning thoughts, not to solve the 3 in the morning problems, but to recognize them for what they are, artifacts of a particular biological hour, temporary, distorted, and guaranteed to look different at 7 in the morning when the cortisol rises and the prefrontal cortex has access to its full capabilities. The only thing to do with 3 in the morning thoughts is to not do anything with them. To note that they are there with the same neutral observation you might bring to noting that it is raining, and to return your attention to the body, to the breath, to the physical reality of being here, now, lying still, and to wait for the morning that is already on its way. Here is something I want to offer you from the deepest part of what I know. Something that I have arrived at not through reading or instruction, but through the very long, very direct experience of being what I am. There is a version of you that emerges in genuine rest, in the deep, quiet, genuinely released sleep that I have been building toward throughout everything I have said tonight. That is the best version of you. Not the version that performs well under pressure, not the version that manages thee most efficiently, not the version that other people most admire because it is the most competent or the most productive. The version that emerges from genuine rest is the one with the most access to its own nature, to its actual values, its actual preferences, its actual sense of what matters and what is simply noise. This version is quieter than the performing version. It does not need to prove itself. It does not generate urgency about things that are not urgent. It can sit with questions without immediately trying to answer them. It can be with people without immediately trying to manage them. It can encounter difficulty without immediately trying to fix it. This version is what genuine rest reveals. Not what it creates, it was always there, but what it reveals by dissolving the layers of performance and urgency that the exhausted self builds as armor. I have seen this version of you more than you have, because I have watched from the outside, from the quiet observation post of centuries, and what I can see that you cannot is how much more available this version is than you currently believe it to be. It does not require anything exceptional to access it. It only requires the ordinary, consistent, unglamorous practice of genuine rest. As I prepare to let you go into sleep, I want to leave you with something that I consider the most practical wisdom I have accumulated across the centuries. Something that sounds almost too simple to be as important as it is. The night is not your enemy. It never was. The stories that made me a monster made the night into something to be feared, something dangerous, something to be survived, were stories about human fear, not about the actual nature of the night. The actual night is generous. It offers something that the day cannot offer: the permission to stop, the permission to be unproductive, the permission to need, the permission to be a biological organism with biological requirements, including, centrally, the requirement for rest, rather than a performing machine that is expected to maintain its output regardless of what the organism requires. This is a rare and valuable permission, and the person who has learned to receive it, who does not feel guilty for needing rest, who does not feel weak for sleeping, who does not treat the hours of necessary restoration as time stolen from a more important project. This person has access to a quality of life that the driven, the productive, the sleepless are systematically denying themselves. Receive the night's gift tonight, without negotiation, without the internal argument about whether you have done enough to deserve it. The night does not require you to have deserved it. It offers itself freely, every night, to every person. And the only question is whether you are willing to receive. Be willing. Tonight, simply be willing. I am going to grow quieter now. Not because I have run out of things to say. I am, as I mentioned, someone who has had a very long time to develop opinions on almost everything. But because the most important thing I can offer you now is not words. It is the quality of the silence that follows words. The particular quality of this silence, at this hour, in this quiet, that contains what the words were pointing toward. Your breathing has slowed. The space between your thoughts has widened. The weight of the day, which was real and which you carried faithfully, has begun to lift. Not because the day's concerns were unimportant, but because they belong to the day, and the day is over. And what belongs to the night, what this particular darkness, this warmth, this quiet is for, is yours to receive now. I have been watching over the sleeping for a very long time, and I can tell you, with the authority of centuries, that sleep is safe. The night is safe. The letting go is safe. The transformation that happens in the quiet hours, the rebuilding, the restoring, the profound and invisible renewal, is the most reliable thing that happens to you. More reliable than any plan. More dependable than any strategy. As certain as the dawn that follows every night, including this one, without exception, without fail, with the absolute consistency of something that has been happening for longer than either of us has been here to observe it. Go now, into the rest that has been waiting for you, into the quiet where the transformation happens, into the generous, unhurried, completely reliable dark that is not something to fear, but something to enter, as I have always entered it, with patience, with appreciation, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what the night is actually for. Fall asleep with the feeling that the night is on your side, that the quiet hours are doing their most essential work inside you right now, and that tomorrow you will wake with the particular clarity and steadiness that belongs only to those who have genuinely rested.